Okay, this is going to be a mostly off-the-cuff reaction to the teaser recently posted by Marvel Entertainment for Avengers Doomsday's casting. All I did, I watched it once and just brought up a bunch of tabs for actors whose names I didn't recognize just by looking at them. There were a number that, of course, I did recognize, but some that I didn't. And so I'm just going to go through and make some comments on the casting and what I'm thinking maybe can be inferred from this, and what my thoughts are for the potential for Avengers Doomsday to save the MCU by playing it safe, because there seems to be some safe playing going on here, but in other ways I'm like, you're missing some people that would be part of that philosophy of playing it safe. Anyway, let's go through here. So first off, Chris Hemsworth playing Thor. It is kind of interesting how much he is willing to to play Thor. He's done 3 Thor movies, or is it 4? Has he done 4? Because there was Ragnarok and then Love and Thunder. He's done 4 Thor movies, and he's still willing to come back for more. So anyway, I kind of shrug at most of the what I've seen of Thor, because it's been a little bit too lighthearted for me. But of course, I can see how that's going to appeal to people. He's one of the main Avengers, so bringing him back makes sense. Next up, we've got Vanessa Kirby. I had to look this one up, so let's see here. She is playing the Invisible Woman in the upcoming Fantastic Four movie. I have not seen her in anything else that she's known for. I must have. Well, did I see Dead Reckoning Part 1? I don't think I did. So I really don't know her from anything. And so I'm just kind of open to, okay, well, we'll see what she does with her role in the Fantastic Four. It's interesting that Fantastic Four movie is a period piece, and so it looks like I've not been keeping up with rumors and stuff like that, so I'm way behind on that. I'm looking at this more of like, is this likely to result in a good film? Not how is it going to connect and advance, and how does it connect with the rumors and blah, blah, blah for what's coming. I am long since over being invested in the MCU on that level. I want to know if they can make good movies again. And of course, by good, put an asterisk by that. I mean good, meaning that which is pleasing to Peter Franson, okay? So I don't have any qualms with anybody who has continued to love what Marvel has been putting out. So yeah, the question is, are they going to be able to make a movie that I think is solid, that I can emotionally invest in like I used to in at least half of the Marvel movies in phases 1 through 2 or 3-ish, you know? And then it was just a select few, like Infinity War, Endgame, the Russo brothers movies, basically, which they're directing this one, so that bodes well. I'll talk about that in a little bit, though. So that's Vanessa Kirby. Anthony Mackie. You know, I just reviewed the Brave New World Captain America movie, and it was not terrible in my estimation, and so it was potentially represents a pivot point. It just depends on what the output is going to be after that, and how the movies after that, you know, come across to me. I don't think I'm ever going to see him as Captain America. Maybe Captain America Falcon or something like that, but I don't think I'm ever going to see him as Captain America, and I talk about why that is in my review of Brave New World. I like Anthony Mackie, I think, as an actor. Yeah, I don't have any problems with him. I liked him as Falcon, yeah, so just more of that. We'll see. They still haven't given me a real sense of what drives his character as Captain America, as Falcon, whatever. I can't remember what his civilian name is. But I've not been inside his head. Even watching the miniseries that was about him, I didn't come away from that feeling like I really knew what was driving him. All right, so let's see here. And that's what I need to really connect to characters. Sebastian Stan, of course, that's the Winter Soldier. I think he's a more interesting character for how haunted he is and how much he wants to make up. It's clear what drives him. He wants to make up for what he was used for in the past. He feels this incredible weight of guilt and responsibility to try and do good in the wake of all the evil he was used for. So the more you can leverage that kind of... who can't relate to that on some level, you know? So Sebastian Stan, I think Bucky could be leveraged very well, but there's a lot of names to get through here. A lot of people going to be sharing screen time, vying for attention. I don't know if the Winter Soldier is going to get what he could really be used for. Letitia Wright. Okay, I had to look this one up. She is, yes, she is the new Black Panther who replaced the previous actor who passed away, and also they had T'Challa, the character, pass away at the same time. And Wakanda Forever did not work for me, but mostly for the same reasons that other Marvel movies didn't. It was, despite this really heavy premise of being in the wake of the death of Black Panther and T'Challa, it was way too jokey and way too lighthearted. I didn't feel the sense of stakes and weight, and I would love to. I'm very ready to accept Letitia Wright as the new Black Panther because I already liked her character. I was invested in her because of the brother-sister dynamic that I can personally relate to, having two sisters. I really liked her character, and so I was already invested in her, and I was like, okay, I will continue to be invested in her if she becomes the new Black Panther. Sure, whatever. But that movie didn't quite give me the opportunity to really invest in her in the way that I wanted to. What's interesting about Letitia Wright, for those who don't know, is she's a very outspoken professing Christian, and so I'm always interested in taking note, as was the actor, by the way, who played Black Panther before her. So I'm always interested in seeing, what Christians are ending up with what roles. It's surprising me to see that there's been an uptick in Christians in leading mainstream roles in Hollywood in the last 10, 15 years. That's a neat thing to see. Now, in terms of like personally where they're at, how committed they are to their faith, how biblical is their faith, I mean, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of like disputes and online. Well, they're not this kind of Christian, so they don't really count or whatever. And at some point, some of that is legitimate, but the spirit in which it's talked about online is really disappointing to be coming from followers of Christ. But nevertheless, I do find it interesting that someone that is outspoken and at least professing a faith in Christ, when they have prominent roles like these, it doesn't mean I'm going to love them and just automatically be a fan and stuff like that. If their performance works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it is something that I take note of. So is this going to be just a closing out of her tenure as Black Panther? Or will this lead to more? I don't know. I feel, it's so interesting where Disney has the MCU at this point. From what I understand, it's not this big event movie, but one like an event after it, like a Secret Wars that is going to be the reboot, I guess. Soft or hard, I don't know how that reboot is going to play out, but that's what's going to be the continuity reset that's going to allow them to bring in the X-Men and stuff like that. So, I can see this being just kind of like a sad farewell or something like that. Yeah, I was Black Panther for a little bit, and she doesn't get a chance to really do much with it. We'll see. It's all going to depend, in my mind, on the writing, the directing, and how much Disney and their agenda is going to be hands-on with this, which I think, given recent kind of like upsets in the status quo and different companies kind of moving away from these really hard left-leaning trends, given the results of the American election. I think even before the results of the election, Hollywood was starting to see, okay, these are failing. We can't keep just throwing money at this stuff. We've got to start making some changes. But I think even more so after the election and the popular vote and stuff, they have to realize, okay, so probably at least half of our audience is not going to be really into hard left-leaning messaging. So maybe the suits at the studio will be a little more hands-off, in which case, if they leave it to the writer and directors involved here, could lead to some good things. I'll talk about that toward the end. But anyway, so that was a rabbit trail. But yeah, Letitia Wright, interested to, there's opportunity for some neat things to happen there. We will see. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's see. Is that the actual next name? No, next name is Paul Rudd. So Ant-Man, I like Paul Rudd, and I like Paul Rudd in the various comedies that he's been in. I just didn't want the Ant-Man movies to be so persistently silly. I think there was some heart in that first Ant-Man movie where he was trying to make things right between, himself and his daughter. But it just became all the more lighthearted and inconsequential from there in terms of dramatic stakes. Of course, it had major ramifications for the continuity and various plot bullet points in the MCU, but I wasn't feeling that. But Paul Rudd, I mean, playing Ant-Man or Giant Man, whatever you want to call him, he is still one of the big names of the MCU, of the ones that are coming back. He's one of the big names. And so could they leverage him in a way that would finally give some weight to him and do some really interesting things? I would love for that to be the case. I just don't have particular faith that that will be. Even with the writers and directors involved, the way they've used him before, pretty much just continued using him in mostly a comedic sense. And so, not optimistic. I just think there's a lot of potential there that I wish they'd take advantage of. Wyatt Russell. Okay, so this is Kurt Russell's son. He almost gets points just for being Kurt Russell's son, because I like Kurt Russell. But what I've seen of him as U.S. agent, man, and I haven't seen, gosh, has it even released yet? This is how I don't even keep tabs, but like the Thunderbolts movie, I don't even know if I'll see that in theaters. But like, what I saw in the trailers there, I'm like, oh, I could maybe connect with his character. Just him feeling like haunted by the fact that he totally blew it in some major ways, or at least that's what people think of him as, is this big failure of a person, instead of being the Captain America that he was really supposed to be in the public's eyes, in his own eyes, what he wanted to be. I think him being a character in the wake of utter failure, is interesting. That's interesting. In a similar way to Bucky and Winter Soldier being interesting. And gosh, he could even, if they are willing, let him channel in some way something repentant from Disney, even if it's just on a money level, if they're not really repentant and regret, because it's all about money. That's why they did the left-leaning stuff to begin with, because somehow they had this ill-conceived idea that it was going to serve them well ultimately in the box office, but it did the opposite, I think. But like if he could be in some way channeling Disney suits, like, oh, how do I make good now? Look at the state that I found myself in. No, I can't imagine he'd be used that way, but maybe in a Deadpool movie. He would be totally used that way in a Deadpool movie. Okay, but anyway, I like the concept of the character. I think, again, there's a lot of potential there, and I've been enjoying, what I've seen of Wyatt Russell. He has some of that down-to-earthness that Kurt Russell had in his roles over the years, so we'll see. I got a feeling that he's just not going to be used to his potential. I would like for him to get his own movie. Even if it's a U.S. agent movie or something, I think there's so much you could do with that character. Oh, well. Oh, well, like I'm already predisposed to it not working out. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just, the world is too big, and I am just too uncultured to pronounce everybody's names, or even most of them, correctly. But Tena Huerta Mejia, maybe, is what I would take a crack at for his name. And that's the guy that played Namor. I had to look him up. But I was like, okay, so I barely remember anything that Namor did in, what's it called, Wakanda Forever. But Namor, of course, is a Marvel character. That's a major Marvel character. Could he be developed? Could he really be a dramatic piece here? Maybe. Right now, I'm just seeing a lot of names and a lot of people thrown together. And in some ways, that makes me like just thinking this is going to be too busy. There's going to be too many characters that were not invested in properly to really get me to care about them and what drives them in their own movies before this point. So you get them in this movie together, and they're going to have even less time to give to establish and really help their motivations. But it's still possible. It's still possible, because I remember in Endgame, even though I was really disappointed by Thor: The Dark World, there was things in Endgame, in Thor's story, and the dramatic weight that his story was allowed to be given in Infinity War and Endgame, that retroactively made events in Thor: The Dark World have the weight that I actually wanted them to have when I was watching that movie, but they did not have. But retroactively, just because of how they looked back upon those events in Infinity War and Endgame, You know, that did some great things for my investment in Thor's story. So could something similar be done here? I don't know. It's very unlikely that I'm going to go back and watch these movies to get ready for Doomsday. They just haven't earned that from me at this point. And the idea of them getting me to invest, just walking into this with vague memories of the movies that precede it involving these characters, they've got a big burden to carry. Okay, so that's Namor. Eben Moss Bachrach. Who is that? That's the guy that's playing the Thing, Ben Grimm. I'm trying to think if I've seen him in anything else. Not really. Not really. So that's just a big we'll see, depending on how he does in Fantastic Four, what that looks like. Moving on, Simu Liu. This is the guy who played Shang-Chi, right? Or Shang-Chi in the movie Shang-Chi and the Legend of the whatever rings. 10 Rings. There we go. And you know, that movie was okay. Had lots of spectacle and stuff like that. This is interesting because this is one of the actors that reminds me a little bit of Rachel. What's her name? Rachel Zegler, who played Snow White. In that she was very outspoken with hard left-leaning views that really kind of alienated a lot of people from her, got audiences upset with her. And almost in a similar way, in some of his appearances on like game shows and stuff like that, this actor has done some things, not to the degree that Rachel Zegler has, but it's interesting to me just kind of how audiences are going to respond to him. I doubt it'll be much of a problem, but I also don't feel really invested in this character. It feels like it's been a while since Shang-Chi came out. And I'm not really, I don't know, he doesn't do really anything for me. So moving on. Florence, Pugh, I don't know. Who is this? Oh, okay, this is the gal that's the new Black Widow. And again, barely remember her because I barely remember the Black Widow movie because I didn't like it that much. So I don't know, we'll see. But the fact that there's a moment in the Thunderbolts trailer where, like, even though it's played for comedy, there was a sweetness to a moment where she's tearing up, and I'm like, oh man, they have a chance of helping me care about this character. Please make good on that, because I would like a character to care about. So we'll see what happens with Thunderbolts. Next up, well, Kelsey Grammer. I mean, that's a nice welcome surprise. Of course, he would be reprising his role as Hank McCoy, the Beast, from the way back original X-Men movies from the late 90s, early 2000s. Kelsey Grammer, also an outspoken Christian. If you haven't seen Jesus Revolution, I highly recommend it. I mean, it's not a geek movie by any means, but anyway, yeah. So neat to see him, but not just because he's a Christian. I really liked his performance as the Beast. I have a soft spot for him because of Frasier and stuff like that. I can't imagine, I don't know how much he would be doing in this. He's going to have a ton of makeup on. Hopefully they at least use makeup and don't do some CG thing. And I imagine any cool Beast stuff he does was just Battle Beast CG or something. I don't know. So this is like interesting, but not necessarily something that gets me jazzed. But I'll enjoy seeing him again. Lewis Pullman. I had to look this one up too. Now I know him from that show on Amazon with the big hole in the ground. What's it called? Let me scroll. Oh, the Outer Range. Outer Range. But he is evidently playing the big bad, the villain in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie, who apparently has like Superman levels of power. So already, I guess, spoilers, he's going to live through the events of Thunderbolts to be in this. Well, I guess they're doing like all kinds of multiverse stuff, so who knows? But I think it probably means he's going to survive. So yeah, I like him as an actor on Outer Range. I can't really say anything else beyond that, but he does a solid job on that show. Danny Ramirez, I think this is the guy who played the new Falcon, quote unquote, the new Falcon. And again, it's just like, this is not, I mean, I haven't seen him in enough other stuff to like for him to kind of be a celebrity in my mind that I would be excited about seeing in this movie. I basically just know him from his, Marvel appearance stuff, and they didn't give me any reason to really be invested in him and understand what drives him. So this is like that you're just cluttering up the space here with this name. It doesn't do anything for me. Joseph Quinn. This is okay. So from an acting standpoint, this is an interesting. I didn't realize when I watched the Fantastic Four trailer that Johnny Storm was being played by the guy with the big, dark metal hair on Stranger Things. And in Stranger Things, I found Joseph Quinn to be one of the most interesting performers to watch. And so I've looked forward to seeing him in more. I didn't even realize when I was watching the trailer for Fantastic Four, that's that guy that I liked from Stranger Things that I wanted to see more of. But I absolutely do, and I'm, But again, it depends on how he's going to do in Fantastic Four, how they leverage him as an actor that I think can deliver. That's a big we'll see. David Harbour, the Red Menace, what is he? Some kind of Russian stereotype comedic guy in Thunderbolts, in Black Widow. Can't even remember what his name is. The way he was used as a character, so much leaning into comedy, unfortunately just made me like, this is not exciting news for me that he's going to be this. I like David Harbour, like him in Stranger Things. I liked his version of Hellboy, even though that movie didn't do well enough to kind of warrant a sequel. I like him as an actor, but I don't have any hype about his character being here. Winston Duke. Who's this? Oh, okay, this is like the other tribe leader in Black Panther, M'Baku, if that's how you say that character's name. Okay, yeah, great. He's back. Just still feels like more clutter. Hannah John Kamen. Who's this? Oh, yeah, she played Ghost in one of those Ant-Man movies, one or more of them. I don't know how many of these Marvel things she's been in. Another character that I just, was there and did some actiony stuff. Yeah, no more comments there. Tom Hiddleston. Okay, so that's going to be a fan pleaser to have Loki back. I did not watch... Was there a season 2 of Loki? There was, and I didn't watch it. I might watch Loki season 2. I think I watched season 1 and liked it enough that I'd probably maybe watch Loki season 2. I think he's definitely a strong performer, especially when they give him some dramatic stuff to contrast the comedic, whimsical stuff. So I really hope that they'll do that. But again, so many characters here. Boy. Okay, so here's obviously a big one. Patrick Stewart, undoubtedly coming back to play Professor X. He's getting up in years. If you watched the Picard series on Paramount Plus, they brought in a lot of like younger actors to do flips and stunts all around him while he is slowly walking through explosions. Professor X, he's going to be sitting down anyway, almost certainly. It's a little weird. I mean, we've seen him come back as this character since Logan, which certainly for both he and Logan seem to be like the swan song for these characters. We're like, they are done. This is their definitive ending, how their stories forever end. But yet we've seen both of them come back as their characters. I just don't know what they're going to do here. This again isn't exciting news to me, but I feel like they are expecting it to be exciting news. When we're dipping now, well, let's just get on to the rest of like the X-Men here, because we've also got Ian McKellen, Alan Cumming, and Rebecca Romaine. The list goes on. James Marsden, Channing Tatum, even. Okay, so let me talk about these original cast members first. We're missing Hugh Jackman. We're missing the actress who played Jean Grey. But we've got some, Alan Cumming. Okay, he was in one or two of the original cast X-Men movies as Nightcrawler. James Marsden, interesting that he's coming back as Cyclops. I think that's a good, solid, like, fan character, at least from the comics. It's he's the solid leader guy of the X-Men. Ian McKellen also going to be really up there in years, so I'm curious as to what they're going to do. I think those are probably going to be pretty short scenes. In fact, even though they're making a big deal out of this casting announcement, I'm hoping that a lot of these names we're seeing here are just going to be in some really short scenes so that they can really focus in on a smaller number of characters that we can care about. What I see, though, in this casting is one of the biggest indications that they are playing it safe. I don't think that they're coming back and like bringing the original cast back as ongoing X-Men or whatever. This is like another like, hey, remember these guys? It's like what they did in the Deadpool movie with like so many returning cameos and stuff. Remember when you used to like Marvel? Here's what you used to like again. Here's a reminder of it. Does that mean you like us now? And for a little bit, that works. And for a scene or two, yeah, I have good fond memories of characters that were brought back in the Deadpool Wolverine movie. I'll probably have some similar feelings here. But am I ever going to watch the Deadpool Wolverine movie again? I don't think so. It didn't make that movie a movie that I was really invested in, that I really cared about. It made it have some entertaining, fleeting gimmicks. And I can see that being the case here. I don't imagine that Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen at their age are going to be like main characters that are in all the scenes and like a main focus of the movie. I'd be very surprised if they got that kind of work commitment out of them at their age. That's a lot to ask from actors at that stage of life. So I think they're going to be probably in and out. Channing Tatum is interesting. He was, what was he, rumored or even cast, and then the Gambit movie or whatever, it just never came to be. So the first time he made an appearance was in something else, and I won't spoil that, but it was a gimmick where he was in the movie he was used in as Gambit. I assume he's coming back as Gambit in this one, but this is, again, such weird casting because it's not even pointing back to a movie that happened. It's pointing back to a movie that didn't happen. So I laughed when I saw that announcement the same way I laughed when I saw him appear in the movie that he appeared in as Gambit. Oh, boy. Okay, so we're getting close to the end here. Pedro Pascal, Mr. Fantastic, okay. And then Robert Downey Jr. Okay, I want to insert in here, after having recorded all my thoughts, I'm going to come back to Robert Downey Jr.'s casting and some other thoughts about who's behind the film that I think are relevant. But first, I want to insert here some thoughts about who wasn't in the movie and thank Spider Dan over on the Discord server at patreon.com/spiritblade productions, where patrons can jump on there and chat away. So Spider Dan pointed to this article at therap.com, 10 major Marvel stars missing from the Avengers Doomsday cast announcement. I thought, yeah, that's worth commenting on too. Who was not mentioned here? Of course, there's a lot of names that weren't mentioned here, but these are some significant ones, I think, arguably. So let me just go through here, at least the ones they point out. I'm not going to read the article, but the first one is Tom Holland as Spider-Man. And I think Spider Dan said something about the deal with Disney being that they can have him for one more movie. I haven't looked in to verify that or not, but if that's the case, then yeah, maybe the thinking would be they save him for something else. This is, on this list, the biggest absence in my mind. I understand on a meta level why it's happening, because Sony owns the rights to Spider-Man. Universal, still oddly enough, owns the rights for Hulk movies. They can't make a Hulk-centered movie unless it's a Universal movie. So that's one of the reasons why we just saw Hulk guest starring and in team-ups and all that kind of stuff. We didn't see Hulk movies after that first Edward Norton one. And this is a real shame. You don't have all of Marvel if you don't have the Hulk. You definitely don't have all of Marvel if you don't have Spider-Man. The place that they have put themselves in is that, and it's in some ways the nature of making movies, is that actors age out or they lose interest or they ask too much money. At some point, there's this meta-level thing going on that keeps the Marvel Cinematic Universe from doing what the comics do. The comics, for decades, DC, Marvel, you name it, they change creative teams all the time. Sometimes every few issues, sometimes from one issue to the next, sometimes after 2 to 3 years. You get a new artist, you get a new writer. The artist draws the character's face differently. It might as well be recasting. The writer maybe brings out some different character traits. And so in some ways you might feel like this is a different version of this character, but there's not a continuity reboot. Fans understand and accept that there are different interpretations of these characters. So as a side note here, what I would love for movies to figure out, and I think I would love for DC to do this first, but I'd love for them to figure out that audiences, I suspect, are ready to adapt to recasting characters and keeping the continuity, keeping some kind of loose continuity that still refers back to things that happened. Maybe it's not so entrenched, but it's still, we still think of it as the same kind of continuity, that this is the same Spider-Man that existed, 20 years ago. That could be a place where superhero movies could go if audiences can adapt to that, and I think they can. We understand and go, yep, okay, recasting, it'll take a little bit of adjustment, but then in so many cases in the past, we make that adjustment and we move on, whether that's TV shows or movie franchises or whatever. James Bond is probably the best example of that, and I think we can do that in comics. But yeah, this deal with Spider-Man, I think, well, Disney, unfortunately, has probably just been bleeding money like crazy. So they probably don't have money to spend on this. But what I think needs to happen is some insane amount of money is offered to Sony, like, we want Spider-Man outright. Because Spider-Man is much more well-known than any other Marvel character. I would say even more than Wolverine. Spider-Man, oh my gosh. And although Tony Stark, Iron Man, was kind of like the central hub or the linchpin or whatever you want to call it of the MCU for a long time. Obviously, they weren't going to have him do that forever because they're not recasting Tony Stark. And for whatever reasons, the actor doesn't want to continue. That's understandable. But now what do? They need some... Spider-Man should be swinging in and out of all these movies to help people care and get butts in seats. That's what they clearly were using Iron Man to do in a number of cases. Like, let's get him in there. People really like Iron Man. Let's get him in the movie enough that we can justify putting him in the trailer that will get butts in seats because we're invested in Tony Stark. And audiences will show up similarly if you have Spider-Man serving that kind of function. But we're in this place right now where he can't. And that is just a huge blow to the MCU and their ability to, they should figure this out before they reboot after Secret Wars. They should figure this out, get Spider-Man, or sell Disney to Sony, or sell Marvel to Sony, or whatever. They need to be under the same roof. That's the first ingredient. They need to be all under the same roof. Figure the crap out. And 2, I think they need to be willing to recast. And then they don't have to deal with actors' crazy salaries that they would demand to continue playing this role when they're getting tired of it or whatever. Recast. We'll handle it. We can handle it. There'll be an adjustment period, but we all got used to crazy multiverse, and now we're more than accepting of it. We're tired of it. But anyway, so Tom Holland, that's the big name on this list that is missing. Tom Holland is Spider-Man. I think they should figure out getting him to at least appear in this movie, and then long-term figure out Spider-Man as a property. All right, moving down. Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange. Yeah, he's not one of the A-list Avengers from like that first group, but he is like a big name, big recognizable character, and so his absence here is also noteworthy. And in part, it's only noteworthy because, what do we have after him? Shang-Chi, and then who is the Sorcerer Supreme right now? Wong, is that his name? Is, I guess, the Sorcerer Supreme now, technically, but Wong doesn't have a movie franchise. He's not going to get a movie franchise. If he does, oh man. So anyway, yeah, I think Doctor Strange is only like a big glaring absence because what we've gotten since then are these fifth tier characters in terms of their home household recognition. Like there's some names going down further on this list, like, yeah, I wasn't missing them. I don't feel like they're missing all that much. Okay, the next one would be Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Well, this is kind of a weird one. I think it would be great to have him in the mix. Because I would love to see how Deadpool behaves and how he is received by other characters while he is breaking the fourth wall but not looking at us. Wouldn't that be interesting? There's so many times where in the comics and in the movies, Deadpool looks straight at the camera. And I would love it if he would do that, but maybe look off in another direction. Like he's looking at his camera. that the other Avengers don't see. Or maybe they do have him look at our, at our camera and our view every now and then. So I got a gnat flying around here. But I think there's just some different angles that you could have, literally, with Deadpool if you throw him in the mix. He could be frustrated at the fact that suddenly he can't use F-bombs or something. He could be frustrated at the fact that he's not seeing as much blood as he's used to seeing. Like, well, I think there's something wrong with my sword. I mean, there's so much that you could do with him throwing him in the mix. But he's also, having him in the mix is a very different experience, a very different tone, and could potentially upset the apple cart. Honestly, I think that's what Marvel could use right now, but is Disney ready for that? Is Disney ready to vary up their tones and have invasions of other tones? So Deadpool, I'm not a huge Deadpool fan. I'm not a huge fan of those movies. I thought they had some nice gimmicks and it was interesting, but I'm never going to watch them again. But I do think he could be an interesting monkey wrench in the works, if that's the right expression. Okay, moving on. Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. Now, I didn't find Brie Larson's Captain Marvel likable because she didn't have a journey of growth. She was just already, I'm awesome, I've already arrived, and I've always been awesome. That's the revelation at the end of the Marvel movie, or the Captain Marvel movie, is that when she gets up, it's like we show clips of the past of she's always gotten up, she's always been determined. Okay, so she didn't go on any kind of journey, she didn't grow, she didn't learn, she showed up awesome from beginning to end. And that's not interesting at all to me. That's not inspiring at all. So on top of that, Brie Larson is a case where I've seen more of her outside of the MCU talking than I want to. And there's just things about her personality that have kind of invaded my perception of the character. That's why I just wish actors would go away. Now, some of that I'm to blame because there's some times where I've clicked on that stuff, but other times it just kind of like ends up being in front of me when I wasn't seeking it. I'm like, oh man, yeah. And so when an actor has a strong personality that has some traits that are kind of rubbing people the wrong way or that have rubbed me the wrong way, sometimes but not always, that can work its way into my perception of the character itself. I think in this case, the combination of the character being so like, I'm right, I've already arrived at being a fully, realized human being. I don't need to go on any kind of character growth journey. I am awesome. That kind of attitude from beginning to end. And then kind of a similar types of vibes in some of the comments she's made outside. I don't know. It doesn't... I think that, she's been quiet for a while, and I think that if they just take me into her a little bit more in terms of what drives her, maybe some flaws she's trying to work through, anything to help me relate to her more, she could work. The reason I would want Captain Marvel in there is just the power level. I think it's cool to have I'm a big Green Lantern fan. And Marvel doesn't have Green Lantern. Closest they have, Captain Marvel, this, cosmic space cop type of thing. And so just conceptually and in terms of that kind of power level, I like to see a spectrum of power levels in superhero stories. And so it would just be cool to have a cosmic level character in the mix. But I won't miss her if she's gone. Speaking of won't miss her, Teyonah Parris as Photon. I barely remember this character. This character, or whatever her civilian name is, was in the first Captain Marvel movie, and then I think she got her powers in Marvels, or no, it was one of the TV shows or something like that. And she's just never been in anything that I really enjoyed or that I ended up seeing because I was just looked at as, I didn't see the Marvels. I looked at the trailer, I was like, no, that is not for me. That is the MCU's pattern to the nth degree, and I'm out. So I'm not missing this character. Chris Pratt as Star-Lord is interesting. The Guardians of the Galaxy movies were really well received, largely speaking. Not by me. They grew on me in some ways after a while, but I was like, this is just not as good as Farscape. It's clearly inspired by Farscape, but it doesn't have the weight that Farscape was permitted to have. I could get on a whole tear on that. I'm not going to. Chris Pratt, he plays the likable kind of doofus hero, I guess. And so his Star-Lord character, is reasonably likable. I don't think I'll miss him that much. It's kind of like one of these things is not like the other. They're off having spacefaring adventures, and it's not really a superhero vibe in Guardians of the Galaxy, even though it's in the MCU. So I guess I'm not feeling that quite as much. But just from a fan reception standpoint, this is a very noticeable absent. I think that Chris Pratt would be a fan pleaser for a lot of viewers to have in this movie. I wonder if they're going to find a way to strike a deal with him. I mean, any of these actors could still be announced. So I wonder if there'll be a deal made there, because that is not for me, but for the general audience, a very noteworthy absence, I think. Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner the Hulk. I already kind of touched on this. I think Disney needs to work it out with Universal and buy Hulk. Or whoever owns Marvel needs to own Hulk. So I think that the Hulk has been sidelined for too long and guest starring and stuff for too long. Of course, if he shows up in Avengers Doomsday, he would just be guest starring again. So I think the likelihood is there from a legal standpoint or a rights ownership standpoint. The likelihood is certainly there. But is it going to happen? I don't know. I think it would be good. I think as many of these core Avengers that you can get in this movie and get them front and center would be great. But Ruffalo's also arguably aging out. He's getting more gray. Maybe people will be less excited. I would be fine with him being gray. In fact, I think in some ways, I think that as actors get older, that's an interesting thing that the movies can do if they really commit to not recasting, that the comics are only going to do in what-if stories, in Elseworld stories. It's like, show me a really old Tony Stark getting in the suit, like freaking Dark Knight Returns, baby. That's what show me a really old Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk. They've already showed the Hulk getting a little bit gray at the temples, It's like, let's take it all the way. I mean, I think that could be some really interesting stuff. I get that that's not going to sell to younger audiences with our youth-obsessed culture. I get it. For me personally, I thought old man heroes were cool even when I was still, in my 20s. Yeah, but I don't think they're gonna lean into that. We'll see. Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye. Of course, Jeremy Renner had a major accident that he had to recover from. I don't know what his recovery level is at and how stunt able he is in this point in his life. Or if that could possibly be playing a role. It might just take a lot for him to work his body up to the point where he can have the arms of an archer again. And maybe he's just not up for that, and he needs to do more grounded, dramatic movies and stuff and not action roles anymore. I don't know. I think that if he does appear, it'll probably be not suited up, probably a passing torch type of moment. Or has that happened already in some kind of Hawkeye TV show that I didn't watch all of? I don't know. I've never been a big Hawkeye fan, so I won't miss him in particular, but I like his performance. I like Jeremy Renner's performance as Hawkeye, for sure, and I think he would be welcome to me. Okay, Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. This doesn't surprise me at all from a business standpoint. From a character recognition standpoint, from a let's get out the big guns, the recognizable characters to get butts in seats and show that we can still do these big, your favorite characters Avengers movies. From that standpoint, glaring absence, especially since he was just in Deadpool and Wolverine. From an actor standpoint, I get it. I mean, my gosh, how many more times can this man, as he's getting older, really push himself to get his body where it needs to be, So I don't know if he's feeling up for doing it yet again. It's only got to be getting harder for him. But I mean, like, he could wear the suit. Yes, there was a moment in Deadpool and Wolverine where, like, we totally see him with the shirt off, but with his mask on. I wonder if that was AI enhanced at all, or like CG enhanced at all. I haven't watched behind the scenes stuff, or done any research on that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some enhancement there. But either way, I don't think he needs to have the shirt off moment. So it's just a matter of, like, does Hugh Jackman want to do it? Will he be able, can they give him the money for this? So again, all the business stuff, if we would, man, imagine the longevity that a cinematic continuity could have if studios and audiences were willing to accept and embrace recasting, as long as it's actors that do a great job and give us a different, interesting take on the character that still has continuity and consistency with their core essence. So much could be possible, but not surprised that we haven't heard that Hugh Jackman's going to be in it. I think he still could be. I think a cameo is still possible. Elizabeth Olsen as Scarlet Witch, again, on a meta level, not at all surprising that she is not going to be a part of this, or, that she wouldn't be announced, at least at this point. Still, all kinds of things are possible. I thought that, kind of like the direction that they took her and where she ended up, I'm like, I want that to go somewhere else. I want to see more. I'm interested in seeing more of this character. I don't know. It was kind of unsatisfying the way that we were left with her, especially given that it looks like, okay, they're not going to do more. So anyway, we'll see. I'm okay with her. I'm not missing her terribly, because I'm not a big Scarlet Witch fan. But anyway, those are all the ones that were not announced that might be kind of glaring absences, and my thoughts on what it would be like to re-include them or whatnot. But now let's get back to my thoughts about the casting we already knew about for a while now, Robert Downey Jr., and then some more thoughts about who's behind the production and what that could mean. And then Robert Downey Jr., who is not coming back as Iron Man, as far as we know. He's coming back as Professor Doom or Doctor Doom or whatever, which is such a weird thing. Definitely sounds like multiverse type stuff. But the way that they're showing his mug here, he showed up to do this promotion, indicates to me that they're going to show his face as Doctor Doom in the movie. Which I thought, the one way I can imagine getting behind the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Doctor Doom is if they never show his face, except being so scarred that you don't even recognize him. And they really say, hey, Robert, this is a chance to just really perform, to do something totally different, to exercise those acting skills and freaking give us a performance as a totally different character that makes Tony Stark impossible to see or think about. And I would imagine some actors would really relish that challenge. Oh, sure, I'll be in a movie in this universe that I kicked off and am so inextricably attached to, and yet I'm going to go back in here and play a totally different character and go so hard into it that they couldn't possibly think about the character I'm obviously known for. But I don't think they're going to do that. I think he was cast not to do something really cool performance-wise, but because people like the gimmick of Robert Downey Jr. coming back because he was Iron Man. So I'm hoping that, like, he will be in the movie in one scene as like one alternate Doctor Doom that then gets just killed off by the real one, played by someone who's not been announced yet, that will actually be a seriously scary, threatening Doctor Doom. That's what I want. I want some sense of stakes again. Could we get that? I think it's possible. Even if Disney execs are letting go of the left-leaning, box checking, they still might not understand that their best movies that people look back on and are like, oh, that was a great movie, are the ones that have weight and stakes to them dramatically. Yes, they have jokes in them. That's fine. Yes, that's part of the Marvel brand. Have jokes by all means. But not at the expense of weight and dramatic stakes, so that I actually care about what might happen next to these characters. You've got to have a return to that. It can't just be an absence of left-leaning ideology. You've got to have a return to some weight and stakes. So, how could that happen? Well, the directors we already know are Anthony Russo and Joe Russo, who directed, I would argue, most of the beloved Marvel movies. So Captain America Winter Soldier, Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame. Am I missing one? Maybe I'm missing one. I can't remember. But certainly those are among the most loved of the Marvel movies. And if they're being brought, them being brought back, I think if you're going to bring back some directors, they're the ones that personally Peter Francis would like. At the same time, they're also very safe because a lot of people liked their movies. And so, did they actually have a vision, a compelling vision for this? Or did they just have a bunch of money thrown at them by execs saying, please, please, people will like hearing that you are directing this movie and they'll trust you and they'll show up for that. Don't worry if you don't have a vision. What was that, the boardroom meeting? I don't know. I really hope they had a vision in the same way that they had vision for the other Marvel movies that they made. It feels like a safe choice. It feels like potentially a promising one, but there's that safe thing that I'm like, ugh, I don't want Marvel to play it safe. I want them to bring in maybe some new directors who have a history of doing great movies and that now they're going to give a Marvel movie to. We'll see. Same time, the writer, Jack Kirby and Stan Lee are credited as writers on IMDb for Avengers Doomsday. I was like, well, okay, well, they've both passed away. I don't think they're that involved. Stephen McFeely, though, is the living person that is also credited as a writer. And he worked on Avengers Endgame, Captain America, the First Avenger, The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Avengers Infinity Wars, what he's known for. He also recently did The Electric State, which I didn't really, the writing I thought was a significant problem in that movie. I didn't see The Gray Man, or maybe I did and just found it forgettable. I don't know. But Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, Captain America Civil War, Thor The Dark World, he was also at least one writer there, so he doesn't win any points being a part of that. But these other ones, I'm like, okay, so if he does what he did in the stuff that I liked, and if Marvel lets him do that, lets the Russos do that, then this could work out really well. But I'm not hopeful. It is interesting to me that Stephen McFeely has worked on both the Marvel movies that I've liked, and also The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia movies, which very much have Christian thinking in their origins and embedded, of course, in their themes, sometimes very obviously. And so I do wonder what maybe his background is in association with Christianity, if he could possibly be a believer himself. I couldn't find any information on that online. Or if at least he is comfortable with leveraging that kind of ideology and bringing those kinds of themes, recognizing really the universality of the story of God and his people that is expressed throughout Scripture, and just kind of like the nature of human life and good and evil and the struggle in the midst of it and the hope for rescue and redemption and stuff. These are the things that we really need in our stories in order for them to have impact. On some level, they have to be referring to those kinds of universal human struggles that Scripture speaks to. Now, I'm going to speculate here, but I wonder if the reason that Disney as a company with its MCU property and with the Disney property, they've gone light and jokey and dramatically inconsequential. Maybe because they don't know how to really address these heavy themes of good and evil and the problem of evil and the need for redemption. The more you talk about these kinds of things, the more you're acknowledging the existence of evil in the world, but then you have to define evil. And relativism, which I think Disney has largely bought into, really just leaves good and evil a matter of every individual's opinion, and we're really not going to talk about those things. We're not going to take a stand, except for on hard left-leaning social issues. But the rest of the stuff, we're not going to make strong statements and stuff, and so you lose the dramatic tension that comes from struggles against clearly defined good and clearly defined evil. I also wonder if maybe out of some misguided effort to kind of like not quote unquote trigger anyone, that has also been a reason why like hard, impactful plot points that would have some weight and drama have been removed, because there's too many people. I mean, we really are dealing with mental health problems in an increasing way, especially with the rising generation. They have increased anxiety, increased stress, even though they are not experiencing all kinds of things that past generations have. So there is this sort of mental health, either crisis or epidemic or just a major problem. And I'm wondering if the thinking at Disney is, well, let's keep it light. People are having all these problems. Let's keep it light. But actually, a good story that recognizes the existence of good and evil and in some way can point to some universal truth that takes at least a step or two toward the solution. That is what people find really satisfying. That's what provides a little bit of tension. Even in something that's largely a comedy, if you have a few points of real relatable tension, it actually makes the comedy funnier and makes your investment in the movie so much greater. And I just wonder if Disney just doesn't know how to do that anymore because of where philosophically so many individuals in authority at Disney are at. That is pure speculation on my part. I am not in the business of reading minds and getting online and wagging fingers at people, but I do wonder if that could be a contributor. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I'm certainly not excited about anything coming from Marvel, but I am curious. Anyway, I would love to know what your thoughts are. You can leave those in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.